Radon. So radon is something that we hear about, 86, so you can see it's very high. We're coming now, at this particular time, into the radioactive elements, a couple of radioactive elements. Radon is an issue which we hear from time to time as a gas, and it comes out mainly from granite. And it tends to be heavier than air, so it tends to drop down in cellars, basements, ground floors, rather than up. It doesn't tend to rise up. So it can be, if you've got a cellar and you're on an area which is a natural radon area, you may get it accumulate in the cellars. So what they have to do is concrete the bases over to stop it from coming up inside a house. And I think a lot of those buildings have been protected in radon areas. So they were particularly high in granite areas, so there'd be quarrying areas like in Somerset and things, when they used to do quarrying and with blasting using dynamite and things, it splits the rock and then it lets the gas out. So let's have a look. So it naturally occurs, it's odorless, tasteless, it's formed as a radioactive decay of uranium. Uranium is found in a lot of rocks and soils. It slowly breaks down to other products like radium. One of the denser substances that remains as a gas, and it is of course radioactive because it's above 83. Environmental Protection Agency estimates that indoor radiation exposure leads to 21,000 lung cancer cases annually. So it was thought to be more of a problem almost in some areas than any other cause of lung cancer. Radon may be a second only to smoking, or maybe more important. It's responsible for the majority of public exposure to ionizing radiation. Single largest contributor to a person's radiation dose, and is the most varied from location to location. Significant indoor contaminant emanates from the ground, as we said. So it's definitely it's carcinogenic, comes from inhaling. It's found in some petrol. Same boiling point as propane, so freshly prepared propane can have radioactivity in it. Residues from the oil and gas industry often contain radium and its daughter cells. So every building contains radon, but the levels are usually low. The chances of a higher level depend on the type of ground. Public Health England has published a map showing where the high levels are. The darker the colour, the greater the chance of high levels. The chance is less than 1 home in 100 in the white areas and greater than 1 in 3 in the darker areas. That's probably the most useful map, you know, to when you study about radon really, is these areas. So you can see they're granite areas primarily, but it's also to some extent in chalk. I know geologists will argue about this. In limestone and chalk. I was always led to believe it was everything south between the Severn and the Wash, and you can see this big area here in the Midlands. So if you drew a line from the Severn, probably a little bit higher across to the Wash, you'd see it would include this a lot here. But Wales is practically all radon, and Cornwall of course gets darker and darker and darker because it's all granite down here. The Lake District would be here as well, and of course the Snowdonia area. So other areas like over here on the eastern side don't have it at all. We found when we've done some work with a particular riding stable in near Stow-on-the-Wold, we were picking up in this riding stable radon gas, and we didn't like to say to anybody, you know, that this is, we said we don't know where it's coming from or why it's there. And then we mentioned about it later on, and they said, oh, we know we're in a very high radon area. And that was in, is it Gloucestershire? Warwickshire, isn't it? Stow-on-the-Wold. Anyway, it's up around this area. So it's just coming into that area there in the Cotswolds. So uranium, which is what radon comes from, has been present since the Earth was formed and is the most common isotope, has a very long half-life. So we're talking about 4.5 billion years if you get this into you. So you're not likely to live to see the day when you got rid of it. Radon and radium will continue to occur for millions of years in the same concentration as it is now. Half-lives of the 6 naturally known isotopes vary between 233 to 69 years. Unique radioactive properties used in nuclear power industries and nuclear weapons. Fallout, of course, from nuclear accidents may affect fish. A review of uranium toxicity in the journal damage can affect the kidneys and the reproductive systems. Brain, central nervous system, cancer, immune system problems. Okay, about probably 10 years now ago, the residents of Sydney woke up to find a red dust all over the city and over the parks and in their gardens and things. And apparently the first news broadcasts of this were that it was from an open cast mine inland which had got a typhoon or a cyclone which had gone in there, whipped in this open cast mine all the material up and gone along through the land to the coast of Sydney and dropped it. And it was an open cast uranium mine. After that, it was never reported again that it was a uranium mine. And practitioners there told me when I went there some months afterwards that it has affected people emotionally in a very strange way. People got very angry and all sorts of things, and they put it down to this uranium. So they told people to simply wash it away with a hose pipe. So it all went down the drains and into the sea. But I suppose what else could you do, you know, with a contamination of that? I believe Australia is actually the biggest producer of uranium in the world. And they're open cast mines, so there's in danger of a cyclone or anything there whipping this stuff up. So there are areas in the world, I think in what was Czechoslovakia, I'm not sure which part it is now, or the Slovak or the Czech Republic, which is also a big mining area of uranium, which is why the Soviets in the old days in the 1970s, wasn't it, decided they weren't going to get independence. You remember Dubček was trying to get independence for a breakaway from the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union said no, 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 and they sent troops in and stopped it all because of the value of the uranium mines to the atomic industry. Right, so looking at toxic metals, we've used homeopathy because you can't really test people with the actual metals. You don't want to put mercury on a person's tongue there, that would be rather crazy. Or any of these would, could be poisonous in there. So using homeopathic dilutions, if you make a dilution, you can put a few drops on the tongue, or you can use them on the body, whatever is your discipline. Okay? What we do is we amalgamate all the toxic metals together and make a composite, we call them. So composites are very useful diagnostic tools to give you a guide. They're not 100%, because sometimes in composites you've got good things and sometimes you may have bad things, and so sometimes they cancel each other out as a result. So you don't base a diagnosis totally, but it gives you a good guideline. So if a person strengthens or weakens to the toxic metal combination, composite here, it could be that they've got a toxic metal. Okay. Now in homeopathy, homeopathy looks like an antidote to some extent. So if you have a particular material which is toxic and you dilute it and dilute it and dilute it, it then becomes the antidote to it. And this is why at a certain point, which is called 23x, 23 dilutions of 10, or Avogadro's number it's called, there's no more of the active ingredient in it, just the vibration of it. So our nosodes of the toxic metals are 30x. So they're above that. So in this case, what happens is a strong muscle will weaken because of the vibration of the uranium in it, or the toxic metal, but a weak muscle will also strengthen. So our advice is, if you're looking at a toxic metal, it should weaken and strengthen, okay, any of these remedies. If it does only one, and it strengthens the person, it may be beneficial to them, but that may not be the answer to the problem. You know, some people will strengthen to mercury, when they've got an infection, but they don't weaken to mercury. Okay, so they have to do both to make absolutely sure that that is the choice that you're doing. So if you had mercury 30x, a weak muscle will strengthen to it and a strong muscle will also weaken to it. It's best to test with full-strength toxic metal solutions if you could, but of course you don't want to do that, certainly not orally. So you could use a full-strength solution to see if it weakens, but my advice is you need to use the homeopathic also to see if it strengthens. Often the best chelating agent is adjacent to the toxic metal in the periodic table. So it could be above or below, it could be to the left or right, or it could be just slightly, the diagonally. So it gives you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, isn't it? 8 options. Now, good detoxifiers, or natural chelators we could call them. Black walnut tincture is a great one for detoxifying. Coriander herb, otherwise known as cilantro, is a great detoxifier. Yellow dock, Rumex crispus. All clear is one of our products. Coriander as a spice is a great detoxifier along with the herb. Lemon balm is very, very good as a detoxifier. Alpha lipoic acid we've spoken about because it contains sulfur. Yarrow, Achilles millefolium. And then specifically for nickel, you may consider vitamin C or N-acetylcysteine. These are very good at getting metals out. And the main intracellular detoxifier of metals is glutathione. And as we've met before, glutathione is, we can obtain it from the food, and it'll get into the cell in some degree with some people, but it depends upon the level of GGT, gamma-glutamyl transferase enzyme, on the outer part of the cell membrane, which tends to destroy the glutathione and break it down into the 3 individual amino acids. And then you have to reconstruct it inside the cell, which takes a lot of energy to do so. So if you've got a high GGT, you're going to get a low intracellular glutathione. And it would appear that the ribose inhibits the GGT. So I wonder why the ribose was so effective. But our testing indicates that people who have high GGT, in order to get the glutathione into the cell, if you take a 50-50 glutathione with the ribose, which as a capsule, it inhibits the GGT from destroying it, and it goes into the cell much more efficiently. So if you just take glutathione, the chances are you'll only get a very small amount, and some people who've got high GGT may not actually get any glutathione in at all. Toxic metals in water-soluble components of the body will chelate out easily with any of the previous nutrients. So most lighter metals come out easy. Aluminium will come out quite easily. Even if you just don't get exposed to it for a few weeks, it'll start to come out. Obviously, the heavier the metals, they don't. So they need some form of chelating agent, and they take longer. So the lead and the uranium and mercury take time, whereas the lighter metals don't. Now, toxic metals in the fat-soluble components. So if we're in the water-soluble components, we're inside the cell, we're in the lymph, we're in the blood supply, we may be in the cytoplasm of the cell. But if we're in the cell membranes, remember we talked about blocking the receptors, that's a different matter. You've got to get a detergent. So somebody's got to get there with a detergent and clean the cell membranes up. So toxic metals in the soluble component of the body may need a solvent such as alkyl glycerol. Now, alkyl glycerol is a phospholipid. It's part of the phospholipid complexes, and it acts as a detergent. It cleans up the cell membranes in there. And it's naturally rich in chlorella, but the most rich source is shark liver oil. And shark liver oil contains 20% alkyl glycerol. We could add breast milk there as well, but that's not a sort of food supplement you can usually go and buy. But breast milk itself is rich in alkyl glycerol, which helps protect children, of course, with the same thing. So shark liver oil is 20% alkyl glycerol. I'm not sure the percentage in chlorella, but it's one of the reasons they use chlorella to help get rid of toxic metals. So amalgam extraction, you definitely need some blotting paper to absorb the finer bits. Probably the bigger bits, the bigger chippings, the dentists will get out with the vacuum anyway. But the finer bits you may swallow, it's possible, but it's best obviously to keep it in the mouth now. So a couple of chlorella capsules immediately before going to have the extraction. 2 capsules immediately you can when they give you the glass of pink liquid to swirl your mouth out. swallow a couple more of the chlorella, and use selenium as a mouthwash during the amalgam extraction. So when you go to the dentist and they give you the pink liquid, just pour some selenium liquid into there and use that, because selenium binds with mercury to make insoluble sodium selenites, mercury selenites, which don't get absorbed. So selenium as a mouthwash during the amalgam extraction, as it bonds with mercury to form selenites, and spit it out after rinsing the mouth each time. Okay, don't go and swallow them.